Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, social marketers around the world. My name is Win Morgan, and as president of the International Social Marketing Association, it's both my privilege and pleasure to introduce the 21st in a series of webinars designed to advance social marketing practice, teaching, and research. I'm here today with Jay Kassir, our organizer of the webinar series, and chair of the ISMA membership committee of our board of directors. Hi, Jay.
Hi, everyone.
And Tamara Harbour, our webinar moderator. Tamara, hi.
Hi.
Good to see you both. Good to hear you both. We'll begin in just a minute, but before we do, I'd like to share some timely updates provided through the International Social Marketing Association. First, mark your calendars and save the date for the World Social Marketing Conference, which will be held in the United States 16th to 17th May. A discount for ISMA members is available. Just go to http://wsmconference.com and go to the call for papers to make sure that you get your paper in. That's been extended to October 6th. And also the early bird rate has been extended as well. So register at this conference site, and we're looking forward to seeing you in May. Also, remember to check our ISMA event calendar, and we'll be posting all the events of the month in the upcoming months for you, so you can stay in touch with what's going on in the world of social marketing. And now I'd like to turn the webinar over to our organizer, Jay Kassir. Jay?
Thank you, Win. And before I turn it over to Tamara, who's been organizing today's webinar, I'd just like to remind you that if there's more than one of you at your location, we would appreciate it if you'd let us know how many you are using the chat box. It's the only way we know. Also, please ask questions using the text box as they come to you. Do I have a slide like that? Maybe not. But anyways, ask them as they come to you. Don't wait till the end of the talk. Sunny will ask them at the end of her talk in roughly the order that they came in. I do have one or two polls for you. We'd appreciate if you'd let us know what area of the world you are connecting from today, please. And I should be able to get it so everyone can see those results. Everyone's from North America. Oh, here we go. Some from Western Europe. Anyone else? 2 from Western Europe, 10 from North America. Okay. And we'd also like to know how you found out about today's webinar, please. And people are still filling it in. You can see the distribution, a number of people from colleagues, mostly from our email, which is great. Community-based social marketing. Okay. That's good to see it coming there. And with that, I'm ready to introduce Tamara, or at least to ask Tamara to take the chair, and she will introduce Sunny. Go ahead, please, Tamara.
Thank you, Jay. It is my pleasure to welcome our speaker today, Sunny Knott. Sunny Knott is a senior transportation planner at King County Metro, where she's worked for 11 years. She manages the Inmotion program at Metro, which is a community-based social marketing program focused on reducing drive-alone travel. She also works with the University of Washington on their UPass program and is the president of the local chapter of the Association for Commuter Transportation. And in her spare time, she enjoys spending time with her family and getting outdoors. I know we're all looking forward to hearing about the Inmotion program, so I'll turn it over to Sunny.
Thanks for the introduction, Tamara, and thanks for listening in, everybody. I am pleased to be sharing the Inmotion story as part of this webinar series, and just happy to be here. So during this presentation, I will provide some background on the Inmotion program and its origin. I'll talk about the social marketing techniques that we use and how we apply them. I'll walk you through our project development steps. I'll talk about some recent initiatives that we've been working on, including motivational interviewing. And then I'll wrap up with talking about the results that we've seen and the impact that the program is making. I am going to advance the slide here. So first I wanted to give you some background on King County, which is the place that I work. King County is the most populous county in Washington State and includes large cities like Seattle, in addition to suburban areas and even rural areas. It's a really large county. It covers, geographically, it covers 2,000 square miles, and over 2 million people call King County home. And within our county, we have a wide range of service levels, both in terms of transportation infrastructure, but also in terms of accessibility to local businesses, to parks, to other community infrastructure, and that kind of thing. So we're working really diverse area. And why did we start focusing on residential? Well, to give you some background, back in 1991, the commute trip reduction law was passed in Washington State, which required that companies of a certain size offer a transportation program to their employees. And through introduction of this law, we saw a really great improvement in, or reduction in, the drive alone mode share for commute trips. And there had been a lot of historical emphasis on work trips from our agency perspective in working with employers. And as we started looking at the data, as you can see here on this graph, work trips are important and substantial, but a lot of our trips are not work trips. About 80% of all of our trips are non-work trips. And so that was really the genesis for the Inmotion program, was this recognition that there's this whole other set of vehicle trips that we need to be changing. So we began the Inmotion program. It started in 2004, and as I think Jay mentioned, it is a community or neighborhood-based program that uses social marketing techniques to reduce drive alone travel. So that's really our focus, is decreasing drive alone, increasing use of all other modes of transportation that are less greenhouse gas intensive, have less impact on the environment. And since 2004, we have conducted projects in 38 different neighborhoods throughout King County. And those projects have really been in a really diverse, as I mentioned, the county has a lot of different neighborhoods in it, and we've implemented projects in a lot of different types of neighborhoods, both urban single family, urban multifamily, suburban, and even rural areas. We target a 10% response rate on average, and we achieve that with most of our projects. And that's equated to almost 25,000 participants over the life of the program. The chart that you see here is a combination of all the pre and post survey data for all of our programs since 2004. And so this is self-reported data. We ask people a question when they sign up about how they get around and what modes of travel they use. And then we ask them the same question at the end of the project time period, which is typically 3 to 4 months after they've filled out that pre-survey. And so we see that across all of our projects, the reported drive alone travel goes down, and there's a corresponding increase in all of these other modes of travel. And this pattern is really pretty consistent across all of our different projects. So now I'll just walk you through kind of the basic Inmotion framework and get into a little bit of some of the social marketing side of things. And I'll go a little bit more into detail on that in the next slide. But our basic framework is that we are doing outreach to people where they live. It's residential outreach, and it's focused on those local trips that people can make within their community. So it's focused on going to your local business district and finding out how close that is that you could really bike or walk there. And you can see an example of our neighborhood map. That's a printed map that everybody in the target area receives that shows kind of how close some of these things are. Community amenities, and we identify through our stakeholder outreach what things are valuable to people to travel to within their community. The materials that we develop are really customized toward the needs and barriers and motivators for that particular community. We lower the barrier to that behavior change by providing information that's customized to what's of interest to the individual participant, and provide rewards that are really tied to the behavior change that we want to see. We are setting up an incremental goal, something that's realistic and not too difficult to achieve, of reducing 1 or 2 trips per week, 1 or 2 drive-alone trips per week of the outreach program. And we are a transit agency, so we're interested in increasing transit ridership, but the Inmotion approach is really multimodal. We're focused on what works best for people, because we realize it's not a one-size-fits-all thing, and some neighborhoods have more transit service than others. Other neighborhoods might be, people might be more interested in walking or carpooling. So I'm going to talk next about a little bit more about the specific social marketing techniques that we use. So our communication is really tailored to the neighborhood based on stakeholder outreach that we do. So we ask people about their specific motivators and their barriers to trying non-drive-alone modes, and we ask them about the benefits to driving less. We then customize the messaging based on what we hear from the community. As we're doing the community outreach, we're really seeking to find out who those trusted partners are and where people get their information from, so that we can identify kind of hyper-local outreach channels to get the word out. We're asking people to make a commitment, which is kind of a core social marketing tenet, as probably most of you know. We're providing incentives to help them get started. And we're using norm appeals. We collect stories from participants and from people in the neighborhood who are living car-free or car-light, and we share those stories with the rest of the participants to show them that there are people in their neighborhood, their neighbors, who are doing this, and it's not that strange for them to be doing it too. So next I'm going to walk you through our project development model, and I'll go into detail about each of these steps, but basics are that we identify the neighborhood, then we go into that neighborhood and we're doing stakeholder outreach. After we get feedback from the community, we're moving into design phase, then implementation, and finally measurement and evaluation. But first, neighborhood identification. So a lot of our recent projects have been linked to our agency's investments in transit service. So places where we are making a significant change in transit service, or where we're adding transit service. And that gives us a good opportunity to talk with people. And that change moment is also an opportunity for people to be thinking about potentially making a change to their travel behavior. We're also looking for, particularly when we're selecting a neighborhood, we're looking for an area where there's kind of a cohesive sense of belonging to a particular neighborhood, and we want to keep our boundaries only encompassing that neighborhood. We're looking for a place that has sufficient travel options for people to take advantage of. So some level of transit service, sidewalk infrastructure, and at least some level of bike infrastructure, that people feel like they have some options that they can take advantage of. So once we've identified a general neighborhood, we move forward with our community outreach and stakeholder outreach. We identify neighborhood stakeholders either through contacts that we have, through web research, through talking with people who we think might know people in the community, and we set up interviews with kind of the main stakeholders to ask them questions about kind of what I mentioned before, which are what would be the benefits for people to drive less? What are their barriers for this particular community? What might motivate them to try it? We test incentives, and we test messaging, and we test the neighborhood name to make sure that we have that correct. And then once we've gathered all that feedback, we use that input to develop the messages that go into the communication materials for the program. So those are both our direct mail, but then also any other communication that we have going out, including anything on social media or via newsletters or email lists and that kind of thing. We're trying to make it the messaging really targeted around what we heard from the community. And through the stakeholder outreach, we've often identified potential partners that we will build relationships with for the outreach time period. So we're looking for partners that can get the word out in some way, have some communication channel to the community, or we're really pretty creative about how they might partner with us. So it can be pretty customized to both our interest in getting the word out, but then their needs as well. And then we tailor kind of some of the key program elements, like the pledge, if there are changes that we need to make to the commitment that we're asking people to make. Typically we're asking people to pledge to drive less, pledge to reduce 2 drive-alone trips per week. We customize any rewards that we're offering. We're typically offering our transit fare card, which is called Orca, and that has been really popular, but in some places where maybe there isn't a lot of transit service, we might offer a different set of rewards for people. And as I mentioned before, we're working to develop all the marketing materials and any prompts that we provide. We have provided a branded tote bag, a branded shopping bag for people to kind of reinforce those local business trips. And we've also done commuter mugs in places where carpooling is more of an option for people. And then we're finalizing any evaluation that the post-project survey that we'll do for the project. And here are some examples of some of the tools that we develop as part of our campaign. So in the upper left is an envelope that is brightly colored and sticks out. The mailer is a little bit bigger than what people normally get in the mail, and really kind of inviting people to open it. The upper middle is a poster that we ask businesses to post in their window. Getting more visibility and having people see it more than one time, because people need to see these things a lot in order to take action. And then on the lower left, that's one of our sign-up forms. People can sign up on paper or online, but seeing the sign-up form helps them understand that we're really not asking them to do too much. It's really a pretty simple sign-up process. And on the bottom, in the middle, that's an example of a mailer that we translated for our Spanish community in this area. It was a significant portion of the population, and I'll talk a little bit more about the work that we're doing to reach non-English speakers, but this is an example of one way that we do that. So once we've designed all of those marketing materials, we're really moving toward program implementation. So we're getting the word out through all of those local communication channels that we've identified. We're getting people signed up. We are sending them travel information packets that are really customized to what their what they are interested in. So if they're asking us for bike information, that's all that we give them. We are not going to send them a huge packet of information and overwhelm them, but really want to be responsive to their needs. And so that and we are doing ongoing outreach to them. So we're sending out weekly emails, reminding them to all of the participants, reminding them of their pledge, and sharing some of those stories of other participants and how they've found success. And getting the communication out there via social media, if that's an appropriate channel for that community, and really just getting the word out there as much as we can. Our programs typically run about 3 to 4 months, so it's really kind of a targeted short time period, but we think just long enough to ingrain the behavior change. And after the active promotional period, we are analyzing results. So we're looking at our comparison of our pre and post survey. In our post survey, we're asking a lot more questions about why they participated, how they used, whether they used their Orca card, the transit fare card, because that's of interest to our agency. We're asking about what incentives were the most powerful to help inform future projects. And then we also have trip tracking data for those participants who track trips. Definitely, it's not everyone. Not everyone is tracking trips, but we see about 25, 30, 35% of our participants tracking trips. And it's really helpful for some people as a reminder of the pledge that they made. For some projects, we're conducting a legacy survey, which is going back to the participants a significant amount of time later and asking them the travel questions. We're actually asking them a few follow-up questions, but particularly the travel question to see what kind of lasting behavior change we are making. And then the final thing is that we look at transit data from the Orca card, both how many of those cards are continuing to be used, and then also whether they're being what routes they're being used on, if that's of interest to the agency, and whether they're being reloaded and with what product. So next I'm going to talk about some of the newer ideas that we've been working on, and one of those is one of the ones I just mentioned, which is on the legacy survey. So the legacy survey, as I mentioned, is a survey where we go back to participants about 18 months following the end of the project period and ask them a few questions, but mainly this travel question around how they get around. And we were pretty pleased with these results. This is panel data, so these are people who responded to all 3 surveys. So we're only looking at people who responded to all 3 surveys, and this is just under. This represents just under 300 people. And I guess the main takeaway from this, or the thing that we took away from this, was the 3 bars at the bottom, which represent drive alone. The green bar is the legacy survey, and what we see is that the blue is pre-project, the yellow is post, and the green is the legacy survey. So what we saw is that people were continuing to reduce their driving 18 months after the end of the project. And this has been very powerful for us, both internally in making the case to our management that we should continue to invest in these projects, and then also it's been great to be able to share these results out. And we have a couple of projects this past spring that also had high participation that we're planning to do a legacy survey for, and we're looking forward to seeing, hoping that the results are consistent with what we're seeing here. So one other area that we are that we are still figuring out and that we are working to do better at is reaching out to non-English speaking populations or limited English speakers. We had one project back in 2015 where our demographic analysis showed that 22% of the population in the neighborhoods we were targeting spoke Spanish. And so this really called for a different kind of approach than we had had in the past. We had translated things before, but we really wanted to go a step beyond that and make sure that we didn't just translate things, but we're also translating into words that were culturally relevant to people and made sense. So we invested a little bit more money and really got the pieces into words that made more sense to people and had secondary and second and third readers of our materials to make sure that it made sense. And I think one big advancement is that we translated our logo, and the Inmotion program became the Vámonos program for Spanish speakers. And I think beyond the just the translations that we did, or the more in-depth translations that we did, we had some really customized outreach that we did. So we went out and set up tables at community gathering places and talked to people in person. And this was really the most successful way that we reached people, was going to Latino grocery stores and we also went to, this was tax season, and so we went to a tax service, a Latino tax service, and people were waiting in line to get their taxes done, and they were happy to talk with us, and we got significant participation from the Spanish-speaking population by doing this. We also had really good relationships with some Spanish radio stations and some strong advocates for the program from those stations that were really successful. So the last sort of emerging idea I wanted to talk with you about was a project that we did in the Green Lake neighborhood of Seattle, where we had a door-to-door effort and used motivational interviewing techniques to reach people. And one of the great things about motivational interviewing is that we're taking the action to reach people, and we're not relying on them to reach us. So typically with our direct mail, we are waiting for people to respond to us and respond to everything that we're putting out there. And in this case, we were going directly to people's doorsteps and having open-ended conversations with them about their travel behavior. And I think that one of the great things about motivational interviewing is that the interviewer is not coming to the person with a set solution to their problem. It's a participant-led discussion that uses open-ended questions to talk about solutions with a person. And so you're able to kind of fully customize the communication with the person. And it really is great at exposing barriers, and we were really impressed with the results that we saw. Some of the lessons that we learned, and I'll talk a little bit more about the results that we saw from this program, but some of the things that we learned is that it's really important to prepare the community. For any of you who've done efforts like this, you probably already know this, but we put door hangers on everybody's door a few days before visiting them, just to let individual homeowners and residents know that we were going to be knocking on their door. And we also let community leaders know that we were going to be in the community. So We notified the local police department. We notified the business district, the Chamber of Commerce that we were going to be out there. We let the city of Seattle know. This was a neighborhood in Seattle. Just really tried to elevate the project so that everybody knew that we were going to be out there. And then this is an actual photo of the outreach team. They had T-shirts, and they actually had jackets too, which it looks like they're not wearing in this picture, but that were branded, and so they looked official. They had name tags. So when they came to people's door, because this was an urban neighborhood, people were expecting them, and they looked like they fit what their expectation is of who was going to visit them. Another thing that we learned was to be flexible in terms of schedule. People were very difficult to reach at home. I guess everybody leads a busy life these days, and so we had to adjust the outreach staff schedules to be more in line with when we were reaching people at home. Training the outreach team is key. Training them in motivational interviewing is key, and encouraging them to use each other as, I guess, as resources to improve the conversations they're having with the community. So if they had a particularly great conversation or they had a challenging conversation, they would kind of talk about that amongst each other and figure out strategies for overcoming any challenges that they had. They also learned that they could cater the conversation based on the person that opened the door. So in this neighborhood, there was a pretty significant segment of senior citizens, and once they had had a few conversations with senior citizens, they could kind of get a sense for what barriers they were encountering, and it could help them guide the conversation to a place that identified those barriers and helped the person identify solutions. So some of the results from this door-to-door and motivational interviewing effort was that so we targeted 5,300 households. That was kind of in the entire neighborhood that we were that was targeted for the project, and we were able to reach at their door 2,200 people. So that's that I mentioned that it was difficult to reach people at home. So we were able to reach through three different visits. We were able to reach 42% of the households that were targeted, and of those people that we actually were able to get to come to the door, we had over half of them participate in the program and become participants. So we were really pleased with the participation rate that we had of the people that we were able to reach, and we'll have to figure out how we reach more people the next time that we do this. So now I'm going to jump into results. So and I'll go from kind of the kind of small to kind of big. And so first, one thing that we look at is our smart card usage, or Orca card usage. So about half of our Inmotion participants don't have an Orca card prior to participating in the program, and that's pretty huge. I think our agency, our transit agency, has a big interest in getting more Orca cards into more people's hands, and so it's pretty significant that half of our participants now have an Orca card in their hand. After the project is over, we go back and we kind of look at how many of them are continuing to be used. 65% of them are used at all. That's both during the promotional period and after. And then 15% of them are reloaded. And some of that drop off in reloads may be because people those 50% who already have an Orca card go back to using their old Orca card once the promotional period is over, and also that our focus is really multimodal, so they could be walking or biking more or carpooling more, and it's not only focused on transit. So at an individual level, based on our pre and post and legacy survey data, during a 12-week program, each participant reduces nearly 11 car trips. And you can see kind of what that equates to in terms of gallons of gas and CO2. And on an annual basis, if we use our legacy survey results to extrapolate, those same participants are reducing about 28 car trips on average per year. And at an overall level, if we extrapolate those results to all of our participants, annually all of our participants reduce 637,000 car trips. And that's pretty amazing. And we will be working to refine that result as we get more results from more legacy surveys. And so that's all I have for you today. And so I guess we can move into Q&A.
Great. Well, thank you so much for a very clear presentation of a number of very interesting things that you're doing. I think some of the questions have been answered as you've been going through, but let's go up to the top and we'll see where we go. First question from Neil Hopkins. Do you experience any surprises with the community psychogeographies, or did you find that people were basically identified as belonging largely overlapped with the actual maps of the area? So they said or felt they belonged to the place that the map said they belonged to.
It can be a challenge depending on the community. One community that we reached out to was Mercer Island, which is an island. That was the easiest one we've ever had because everybody on that island identifies with living in that community. But there are often those boundaries that are more difficult to identify, and our neighborhood maps can expand further than just the neighborhood where we're doing the direct mail to. And that's something that we really have a conversation with the community about where they identify, and then have them draw boundaries on a map. So we actually bring a map to some of our stakeholder interviews and have them draw boundaries on it and look at it, and we do our best. If we get lots of different answers, we do our best.
Thank you. The first question from Phil, there are two in a row. I think you've answered already. You do have a legacy survey with interesting results. The second question, knowing what you know now, what might you do differently?
Just overall, huh?
Mm-hmm. What was the key learning for you or surprise for you?
Let's see. Well, I think we are trying to be responsive to the changing communications environment that we're all facing, both in terms of people are getting information from a lot of different places, and I think that we may right now direct mail is the way that we get most of our participants, but it may not be the way that we get most of our participants going into the future, and may not be the way for all neighborhoods. And so I think that we are going to have to begin to really think about which communication channels we use to reach people and prioritize that.
And if not direct mail, what else is coming up now as something you're looking at over the horizon?
Right. Well, so social media, particularly Facebook, for us has become a a way for more of the tech-savvy communities. That's the way that we're getting information out to them, and we've had some pretty good success with geo-targeted paid Facebook advertising that really can be pretty hyper-local and seems to reach people who are in those well-connected communities. We've also done online geo-targeted advertising, which can get down pretty close to the neighborhood level, and we're able to reach people quite a bit that way. It can be dependent on the community too. Some communities get a lot of information from local blogs, and so partnering with those blogs has been pretty successful for us too, both in terms of getting articles about the project, but also getting key placement of both advertising and then and those articles that we write.
How many staff members were required to implement this program?
So we have about, we use consultants a lot for implementation of our projects. Mm-hmm. At King County, we have about 1 to 1.5 FTE working on the program, plus an intern that that helps us out very much. But we put a lot of our projects, almost all of our projects, out via a consultant roster that we've developed, and they manage a lot of the implementation for us, and we're in a project development and advisory role.
Okay, thank you. Now, Doug asked a question about how you corroborate your or triangulate your data. And so you're using panel data, which is self-reported. You do it before, after, and then a year and a half almost out. Mm-hmm. And then in addition to that, you have the card data.
Right. And the Orca card data won't give us everything. So we are not a cashless system. People do still sometimes pay cash. And we also have a significant amount of employer investment in transit pass programs in our area. So a lot of employers in this area purchase transit passes for their employees or provide them at a significant discount. So we can't just use our promotional Orca cards to measure the impact. Back when we did our first Inmotion pilot, and maybe we need to do this again, but back when we did our first Inmotion pilot, we picked 2 neighborhoods, and we looked at transit ridership in both of those neighborhoods, 2 similar neighborhoods, and used one of those neighborhoods as a control. So in one of the neighborhoods, we implemented an Inmotion campaign. In the other one, we didn't, and then we compared transit ridership in both of those. And we had a higher increase in the Inmotion, the neighborhood where we did the Inmotion campaign. And but that's been a long time since we did that, and I think that's kind of the only true way that we could corroborate it again.
Mm-hmm. When you've done things like that, have the card data been reflective of what people have been reporting or not? And the other thing about the transit fare card is that we don't have the pre-data. That's just giving us a snapshot of what people are doing today. So we don't know what they were doing before they got that Orca card, except based on what they tell us through the survey. Yes.
it's challenging, and I see Doug added a question. That the panel data favors those that are most motivated, and I think that's true. And we could look at sort of everyone that responded to any survey, but I'm not sure that that would be more. That would give us more reliable results than what we have.
Okay. Well, it's an interesting issue. If anyone else has any comments, you're certainly welcome to put them in. Well, I'll move on to the next question for the moment then. And I'm going to skip the chairperson's one, sorry, for the moment until we have time. So Jennifer's would be next. When in the field, approximately how long were the conversations at the door? Actually, there's a number to do with this motivational interviewing. There's another one as well. I'd like to hear a little bit more about the actual brass tacks of motivational interviewing. You gave the context and what you learned and so on. But like when you're actually there doing it, what's involved? How long does it take? What is this conversation at the door like?
Right. So it's typically between as short as 5 minutes and up to 15 to 20 minutes. We had examples of people inviting the outreach staff into their house to have tea, which was really heartening. It was right at the beginning of the project, and we felt we were really anxious about going to people's doors, and that was really heartening. I guess the first part of the conversation is really getting people's interest. And so one of the things that a lot of the outreach staff led with was the travel resources that we had available to people. And then that invited a conversation about, well, so what travel resources do you have? And we had a neighborhood map, and then they could kind of talk through, did you know that there were all these options available to you in this community? And then it really let it open to the person then to talk about, yes, I did, or no, I didn't, and having them talk about whether there are any issues with the current way that they travel. If there aren't any, if they don't come up with any issues, if they're perfectly happy with driving alone everywhere, that's not a conversation to spend a lot of time on, because we're really looking for people who have some sort of challenge and they have some sort of tension to cause them to kind of flip over and want to make that change, I guess. Does that help at all?
I think so.
Okay.
Speaking of that, there is a question from, where did it go? Neil, what was the most common barrier to adoption faced? What did you come up across when you were doing that most?
Do you mean just in general, or in the motivational interviewing?
I'd be interested to hear both, actually, if you know.
Well, so it varies. I mean, it varies by neighborhood. We hear a lot about time, that people value their time, and that it takes longer to ride the bus. It takes longer to walk there, and so that's a big barrier for people. In some neighborhoods, personal safety is a big barrier. So being out on the streets or waiting for the bus is seen as a barrier because they're concerned about personal safety. Let's see, what else? Not feeling like there are options that go where you need them to go, and that may be a truth, or it may be perception, and then it's just kind of, in motivational interviewing, we can kind of talk through that, whether that's a perception or an actual barrier. And with our mail-based campaigns, then that's an opportunity for either the neighborhood map, which is not just a map, it actually on the back includes a frequency table for transit, so showing how frequently routes come and where they go to on both during the week and on the weekend, so that people can kind of figure out if there are options available where they go. So those are kind of the main barriers that we hear about.
Thank you. You had 5,322 households, I guess, targeted, and then you visited 2,230, Phil keenly observes. How did you determine which of the houses were visited?
Well, so it's kind of, maybe I should change that term. So visited means that we actually were able to talk with someone. So targeted actually does mean that we knocked on all 5,300 doors. And we knocked on their doors 3 times.
And some of them weren't there for any of those 3, and those were the remaining ones.
Right. A lot of them weren't there for any of those 3. So 50, over 50% weren't there for any of those door knocks.
Okay. Stephanie and Jennifer have questions about your outreach team and how you trained them. So from Stephanie, how did you develop the outreach team? Were the members of the outreach team volunteers or paid? How did you recruit? Jennifer asks, what type of training did you give them prior to conducting the interviews? And was there role-playing involved or just instruction?
Yes. So let me see if they were paid. They were not volunteers. They were mostly students, a lot of them. So they were working part-time schedules, typically a 3 to 4, maybe 5-hour shift in the late afternoon, and then working on the weekends as well. So it was a part-time position. And the recruitment was done through student employment sites, through local transportation advocacy organizations. So we have an organization called Feet First, which does pedestrian advocacy, and they have a lot of staff that do outreach events for them. So asking them if they had people who were interested in this position, and so using our networks. And we did work with a consultant team on this project. We worked with Steer Davies Gleave, if any of you are familiar with them, and they created the training outline for us. They had done this type of effort in the past, and basically it was a one-day training, and it was very hands-on and involved a lot of conversation, practicing of conversations, practicing of techniques, trying to get your head out of knowing what the solutions were. And actually it was really great. The outreach team weren't necessarily transportation experts, which is kind of a good thing because they don't necessarily have all of the solutions in mind that they might want or actions that they might want people to take. So it lended itself well to this approach.
Lisa Phil Brooks, asks 2 questions. How much did it cost to acquire each participant? And can you go back to the slide with the 5,322 participants and 23%? And how that translates to 58% becoming Inmotion?
Yes. So we typically, let me think about this. I might have to get back to you on the cost. We typically target based on a cost per all the households reached.
And what would you say that was again? I think you've given it to me before.
Yeah, we typically do around $15 per household.
Whether or not they participate.
So
when you go to
whether or not they participate, yeah. So then, and it's kind of scalable. So large target areas cost a little bit less, and smaller target areas cost a little bit more because there's, a significant number of things that have to be done no matter what. And so that can be easily extrapolated from the 10% participation rate. So typically we have a 10% participation rate, so about $200 per participant. Let's see, is that right? I might have to get back to you on that. It's around that.
Yeah, sure. You may well have more than one question, in fact, to get back to people on at this point, because we're getting almost at the end of the webinar, and I see there are a few questions. So we can certainly leave that. Did you want to go back to the slide about the
sure,
took
sorry.
that question out. If we haven't finished it, please don't take it out as an answered question. Sorry. Go ahead and answer that.
So sorry, what was the question again?
Can you go back to the slide with 5,322 participants,
yes.
23%, how that translates to 58% becoming an
Oh, yes. Yeah, so basically what we were looking at was, so of the people that we actually reached at their door, how many of those became participants? And that's where that 58% came from. Does that make sense?
I'll let Lisa tell us whether they...
I might need to change this up a little bit, but basically I wanted to say, okay, we realize we have a challenge reaching people at home. But so what was really powerful, I thought, about this project is that of the people that we did reach at home, a significant portion of them participated in the project. So once we actually got to people, they were willing to have a conversation with us. So that was powerful.
Okay, great. Do you have a website for participants?
We do, yes. And we make it active during the promotional period. And this is kind of the sign up page and everything. And we have a general Inmotion page, which is kingcounty.gov/Inmotion. And that's where all of our participants go to sign up and log trips. Right now we don't. Oh, go ahead.
Gamification.
Gamification. We have had at least one foray into gamification, and we did not find that people really took us up on it, I guess. So I think that it's something that I'm interested in pursuing in the future, particularly if we can use some existing technology that lives out there. I think that technology companies are better at developing technology than public agencies are, and so if we can take advantage for relatively low cost of something that could provide some of that interactivity, I think we'd be open to doing it. But we didn't get a whole lot of traction from it the first time that we tried it.
Okay, one last quick question if you don't mind, because I don't think we've had
Sure.
anything from Michael Dreger before. You mentioned some creative and unique methods for securing partnerships and stakeholders. Can you just give us some quick examples of those?
Sure. Well, so I guess one example is we worked with a grocery store that was interested in Inmotion to have them do bag stuffers in bags as people, so people got information about Inmotion doing their grocery shopping. We have worked with, let's see, I already mentioned some of the blogs that we've worked with, but let's see, what else? The radio stations, I guess I would mention again that was the Spanish radio stations were really powerful. We had one live DJ event where we had an event going on and the radio station came out and live broadcast from the event, and people came and were interested in signing up, and that was a great partnership.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid we're going to have to end there. We do have a few questions left, and Sunny has volunteered to answer them afterwards. So we'll send the email out with those answers to everyone. I'd like to thank all of the participants in today's webinar for coming. As you leave the webinar, you'll be offered the opportunity to fill out a short evaluation form, and we do depend on your answers when developing our upcoming webinar. So please let us know what's working and what you'd like us to do differently. Our next webinar in this series is social marketing. I think that's here. There we go. Social marketing for policymakers, the Help Me approach with Nancy Lee. So how you can convince policymakers how and when social marketing fits into the toolkit and when it's more cost effective than other approaches. Finally, thanks to Wynn, who's helped make these webinars an important part of ISMA's member offerings. Wynn, over to you.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Jay and Tamara, it's always a pleasure to be part of the webinar, and you make it really seem easy. But I know you spent a lot of time organizing the program, and we do appreciate your time and your efforts. Sunny, great presentation on the Inmotion program. I hope we can have you back for another webinar in our future webinar series.
Sure. Thank you.
That'd be great. And to our members, our participants in today's webinar, thank you for your continued support and participation. We hope to see you at the next webinar, Social Marketing for Policymakers, the Help Me Approach with Nancy Lee in USA on November 17th. Remember, it's free if you're a member. Just sign up. And until then, keep visiting the ISMA website, share your events on our calendar, exchange resources, and keep up with our Career Center. Until then, this is the International Social Marketing Association. We now conclude today's webinar.